Welcome back to our channel, where we provide updates and undisclosed narratives on Catherine, Princess of Wales, and her royal family. We provide you with the exciting news King Charles and Camilla were in tears after the royal nanny revealed a dark secret about Princess Diana that had been kept for 26 years. King Charles was left without the ability to speak when the royal nanny broke her silence on the most closely guarded secret in the last hours of her employment and was tormented by members of the royal family, according to an insider source who spoke on the condition of anonymity. This revelation has transformed the speculations surrounding Princess Diana's death. The silence of a nanny is shattered. A new account of Diana's last hours reopens. Questions that have been around for decades. It has been almost 25 years since people all around the globe grieved the loss of Diana, Princess of Wales, who had gone away. Nevertheless, the questions regarding her last days and the tragic night of August 31st, 1997, have not been adequately addressed over the years. At this point, the official story is in danger of being overshadowed by a shocking new testimony from an individual who was once an integral member of the royal family. After decades of maintaining her silence, a former royal nanny who devoted years of her life to the care of Princes William and Harry, and who has stayed unidentified and out of the public spotlight, has finally spoken up. On the other hand, the evidence that she gave is not just a compilation of cherished recollections from her time in the palace. Instead, it is a detailed and frightening description of the hours immediately after the princess's death, focused on what she observed inside Diana's private room at Kensington Palace. In her narrative, the nanny depicts a scene that is not one of solemn grief, but rather one of disturbing disarray. She claims that before the rest of the world had even completely processed the information Diana's rooms were entered, and her personal belongings, which included sensitive documents and a letter addressed to Prince Harry that had not yet been completed, were tampered with. Should her allegations be confirmed, they would indicate that immediately after the deadly tragedy that occurred in Paris, there was a concerted attempt inside the palace to restrict the flow of information and to assure that items that may possibly be harmful were kept safe. The narrative, which is already full of discrepancies, official probes, and conspiracy theories that refuse to go away, has been given an additional layer of complexity with the introduction of this new testimony. It calls for a re-evaluation of the events that occurred that evening. However, it is not to be done amid the twisted ruins of the tunnel at the Pont de l'Alma. Rather, it is to be done inside the hushed, glittering walls of Kensington Palace, where, according to one woman's long-suppressed recollection, the first chapter of a cover-up could have been written. A timeline full of contradictions. Chaos at the palace. The princess was not accompanied by the nanny in Paris on the night of August 31st, 1997. Instead, the nanny was working at her station at Kensington Palace. She remembers being awakened by a phone call in the early hours of the morning, during which she was informed that a catastrophic accident had occurred. She asserts that the subsequent events contradict the official narrative the palace disseminated over the next few days. For a long time, the official story has been that the royal family, which included the Queen at Balmoral, was notified of the princess's death in small increments. This narrative suggests that the courtiers refrained from taking any serious action until they received absolute confirmation. Nevertheless, the nanny's story portrays a picture of a castle that was already in a state of regulated silent activity even before Diana was officially proclaimed dead. In a statement that she released not too long ago, she recounted that, "We were instructed to maintain our composure because there were not many details available." However, the general attitude was not one of bewilderment. Rather, it was one of control. There was an unmistakable tension in the air, a feeling that certain people were aware of more than they were leading others to believe. She recounts the experience of being escorted into a room off to the side and being given the instruction that she was not allowed to talk to anybody. She was then left in isolation while the senior staff members went about their business with a calm, unsettling determination. In her opinion, this delay in the distribution of information to the immediate home was not the result of a sense of prudence, but rather of a purposeful strategy. As daylight drew closer, the feeling of discomfort became more and more intense. The nanny alleges that she spotted palace officials visiting and leaving Diana's private apartment prior to the formal public announcement of Diana's death. This action, which she perceived as significantly out of the ordinary due to its early timing, took her aback. During a period of national shock and sadness, the preservation of a place of mourning did not seem to be the goal. Instead, the rapid sorting and safeguarding of papers seemed to be the emphasis. When the nanny saw this, it was the first of many observations that reinforced a concern that she has held for the last 25 years, that the handling of Diana's death was a well-choreographed operation from the very beginning. She tells of the day when she was experiencing anguish, and a senior royal assistant saw her discomfort. The assistant went in close to her and quietly asked a question that has continued to reverberate in her thoughts ever since. This incident was the most unforgettable moment, she says. The inquiry was, what did she try to say before she passed away? The question suggested a common assumption that Diana may have had one last message of utmost importance to impart. The frightening realization dawned on us that even after her death, we still had to control her voice. Washington Irving wrote 2 short stories, The Disturbed Room and The Vanishing Letter. When the nanny finally received permission to enter the premises, Diana's apartment was far from a serene place of reflection. Instead, she was met with a scene of chaos. Diana's chambers, which are often a lively and perfectly ordered sanctuary filled with images of her boys, personal messages, and beloved souvenirs, seemed as though they had been defiled. She depicted the situation by saying, it was as if a calm and methodical search had been conducted. It was not the kind of commotion that accompanies a burglary. It was the labor of someone who was trying to find something in particular. A writing desk was strewn with letters, some of which had been opened, while others were still unopened. Drawers that were usually kept closed were left slightly open. However, the most crucial and troubling element was an unfinished letter that was lying on the desk. It was partly concealed by a framed portrait of Prince Harry when he was younger. There was no doubt about it. The handwriting was Diana's. The nanny is certain that she saw it and that she touched the paper for a moment. The first words etched in her memory were, "Harry will know what I—" The sentence was left unfinished, leaving a last idea hanging in the air. The letter had vanished within the span of 48 hours. She received emphatic denials in response when she questioned about the matter. It was explained to her that no such letter existed and that in her sorrow and shock she must have made a mistake. However, I did witness it. She insists that she had physical contact with it. It was present at one moment, but at the next it had vanished. It was taken by someone. The revelation that there is a missing letter addressed to Harry is quite shocking. Diana was a very prolific writer of letters, and she often wrote handwritten letters to her boys in which she communicated her most profound feelings and anxieties. On the other hand, this specific letter communicated what the nanny refers to as a feeling of finality and urgency. The fact that it has vanished raises several thought-provoking concerns, including, what information did Diana wish to pass on to her youngest son? Was there a warning, a confession, or a last desire included in the letter? And most importantly, who had both the motivation and the power to carry out the removal of it? The nanny's statement aligns with the long-standing accusations of removing essential documents from Diana's possession after her death. Since then, other unnamed royal aides have claimed that Diana maintained comprehensive documents, which included letters and notes that detailed her worries for her own personal safety, as well as the immense pressures that she was under from inside the royal family. An individual with inside knowledge said that the letter, which was not finished, might have included Diana's concerns about being silenced, which is a phrase that she is said to have used in talks that were kept secret. The disappearance of the letter caused Diana's private apartment to undergo a transformation from a place where memories were kept to a location where a crime may have been committed. It wasn't a violent crime, but rather an act of erasure. In the conflict over Diana's legacy, which started even before her corpse had been transported back to British soil, the truth about what Diana wanted to say to her son may have been the first victim. A sister's feelings of culpability and a butler's sense of responsibility are intertwined. The nanny's story does not exist in isolation from other factors. It is consistent with the public admissions and private anxieties of other people who are close to Diana, with the most notable examples being her sister Lady Sarah McCorquodale and her trusty butler Paul Burrell. For many decades, Lady Sarah remained a modest figure protecting the privacy of her family. Nevertheless, in a rare and emotional interview that she gave for a BBC program in 2017, she finally spoke up about a load of guilt that had been weighing on her for so many years. Her voice trembled as she spoke, saying, "I introduced her to Charles. It was I who was responsible for it." In addition to this personal remorse, Lady Sarah disclosed important information on Diana's state of mind. Diana had increasingly worried about her safety, which manifested as an unusual obsession with her seatbelt, as she confirmed. Diana was quite particular about wearing her seatbelt, and she would often scold other people for not doing the same, according to Diana's sister. She would refuse to let a trip begin until she had made certain that she was firmly strapped in place. Such behavior makes the reality that she was the only passenger who did not have a seatbelt on at the time of the deadly incident a very puzzling irregularity. Lady Sarah made a quiet comment. "That is completely absurd and makes absolutely no sense," and then left the subject in the air for someone else to answer. Was it a straightforward mistake that resulted in death made in a time of complete panic, or does it mean something more sinister like a broken buckle or deliberate tampering? The official British probe Operation Paget was conducted at a later time and mainly disregarded the fact that the seat belt was inoperable, which was a feature that had been highlighted in the first French investigative reports. Paul Burrell, who Diana referred to as "my rock," has made further shocking accusations. He had access to her most deeply held secrets and concerns since he was her butler and confidant. Burrell announced that Diana had handed him a letter barely 10 months before the collision that ended her life, a letter that acted as a frightening premonition. Burrell made this announcement many years after Diana's death. According to the allegations, she penned the following words in it: "This phase of my life is the most dangerous of all. Is plotting to cause an accident in my car, which will involve brake failure and a severe head injury to pave the way for Charles to get married." Burrell may have found the information included in the letter too unbelievable to accept, and as a result, he hid it. However, following the accident, Diana's statements began to have a prophetic ring to them. The letter, which was eventually given as evidence in the inquiry following her death, became a cornerstone for conspiracy theories, implying that Diana was not delusional but rather clairvoyant. Burrell stated that Diana trusted him to preserve documents as a form of insurance for her. She thought that if she had a collection of secrets, he would be able to protect her. Consequently, if the nanny's claims are taken seriously, the loss of any such documents from her residence would constitute a neutralization of that insurance policy. The summer that was the last. A climate of fear. The portrayal of Diana in the months leading up to her death, as portrayed by her family, colleagues, and friends, is one of increasing concern. The paparazzi portrayed her last summer, which she spent on a boat with Dodi Fayed, as a romantic getaway that was devoid of worries. However, Lady Sarah revealed that beneath Diana's dazzling exterior, fear was consuming her. Diana was under the impression that her discussions were being watched, and as a result she would often talk in hushed tones during telephone calls made from the boat. While she was in the process of narrating the odd clicking noises and echoes that she could hear on the line, she turned to her sister and said, "They are listening to me." The friends of hers maintained that the condition was not the ordinary paranoia of a celebrity who is constantly harassed by the media. Diana had come to the conclusion that spy organizations were monitoring her. Mohammed Al-Fayed Dodi's father eventually lent credibility to this notion by spending years and millions of pounds on a campaign to demonstrate that the couple had been the victims of a murder. He asserted that paparazzi were not following them. They were being followed by people who were professionals in their field. During this time, Diana began to maintain a comprehensive diary, according to a former staff member. This journal was a red notebook in which she recorded dates, names, and unusual happenings. It is said that she informed one of her friends that these notes would assist her in remembering everything later on. This notebook, like the incomplete letter to Harry, was never found. She would go back and forth on the deck of the boat in the late hours of the night, according to one of her aides, who remembers seeing her writing notes in the notebook with extreme urgency before turning her head to glance behind her as if she were aware that she was under surveillance. Diana's intuition was in a state of heightened awareness, regardless of whether her anxieties were legitimate or the result of tremendous psychological strain. She had the impression that the situation was quickly progressing to a point where she would no longer be able to manage it. All of her last actions, the quiet phone conversations, the lost notebook, the claimed prophetic letter, point to a lady who understood that danger was close in. The crash. Was it the result of incompetence or a conspiracy? The official conclusion about the deaths of Diana Dodi Fayed and their driver Henry Paul is that the accident was a terrible occurrence that was brought about by a motorist who was evading photographers while driving in a hazardous manner and under the influence of alcohol. On the other hand, the chronology of what happened in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel has so many contradictions that it cannot be disregarded according to a large number of people, including medical first responders and police investigators. The delay in the arrival of the ambulance, it took an amazing 1 hour and 40 minutes for Diana to reach the Pitié-Salpêtrière hospital after the accident occurred. This is a voyage that should have taken just a few minutes. The rationale that was given was that the French emergency response strategy places a higher priority on treating patients at the scene than it does on transporting them to the hospital as quickly as possible. On the other hand, since then, several medical professionals have contended that her chances of life would have been much greater if she had been rushed to the hospital without delay. Communication problems. According to official documents, the radio interactions between the hospital and the ambulance were fraught with problems. It was impossible to establish a precise chronology of Diana's medical care at the scene due to the fact that important messages had been inexplicably deleted. The missing Fiat. Uno eyewitnesses have said that immediately after the collision occurred, they saw a white Fiat Uno leaving the tunnel. On the wreckage of the Mercedes paint was discovered that had come from a car of this kind. Although the investigation was extensive, neither the automobile nor the driver, whose name was Levantin and who was a vital witness, was ever held accountable in a manner that was entirely satisfactory to every investigator who was involved. The seatbelt lady. Sarah has noted that the fact that the most safety-conscious person in the car doesn't wear a seatbelt is a mystery and a serious problem. These facts, according to one investigator, combine to form a perfect storm of errors. However, those who harbor skepticism may find the phrase perfect cover-up more fitting. For a long time, Mohammed Al-Fayed held the belief that the accident was the result of an assassination plan that was carried out by MI6 on the instructions of the royal family. He stated that the royal family could not tolerate the notion of a future king's mother marrying a Muslim. Al-Fayed's hypotheses have been mostly brushed off as the desperate and grief-stricken ramblings of a parent, but the fact that Diana herself wrote about her concerns about a manufactured automobile accident gives these notions an unsettling degree of reality. The line that distinguishes between catastrophic ineptitude and intentional conspiracy becomes disturbingly indistinct when the nanny's testimony of a palace that is under control and the disposal of evidence are taken into consideration. The legacy of Princess Diana, who refused to conform, is significant. The death of Diana not only deprived the world of a cherished symbol, but it also brought to light the profound divisions that exist within the British monarchy. The inflexible, antiquated institution that she had married into was a continual source of conflict in her life, since she was always fighting against it. In her Panorama interview, which aired in 1995, she gained notoriety for her description of her marriage to Prince Charles as a crowded marriage. This marriage was a national scandal that revealed the hypocrisy that existed at the core of the establishment. Her open admissions about her bulimia and despair, her use of the media to tell her narrative, and her groundbreaking humanitarian work, which included fighting against landmines and embracing those who were living with AIDS, established her as a one-of-a-kind force for good and a pioneer of progress. She not only made the monarchy more relatable to the general public, but also brought attention to its shortcomings, posing a danger to the establishment. A lady who is yearning to have her voice heard is revealed in the Peter Settlein tapes, which are recordings of private voice coaching sessions that took place in the early 1990s. "They don't see me," she spoke, her voice filled with agony. "They only see me as what they believe I need to be." These recordings, in addition to her clandestine partnership with author Andrew Morton on the memoir Diana, Her True Story, were efforts to retake control of her story from a system that wanted to dominate it. The nanny's tale derives its strength from the backdrop of this particular situation. The purported removal of an unfinished letter to her son was not just the theft of a piece of paper, it was a continuation of the prolonged attempt to silence her. Diana's impact continues to endure in the present day, with the most compelling example being her sons. Both Prince William and Prince Harry have talked about the long-lasting pain caused by the loss of their mother, and they have carried on her work in various fields, including mental health and humanitarian relief. Nevertheless, their own fragmented connection is in several ways a mirror of the unsolved conflicts that their mother embodied: the fight between responsibility and personal freedom, tradition and modernity, quiet and truth. The nanny's choice to speak up now after 25 years of silence is not just a historical recall. It presents a challenge to the sealed narrative. We are strongly reminded that the whole story of Diana's death may not have been disclosed yet when we hear her description of a disturbed room and a missing letter. The people's princess will not only be remembered for the life she led, but also for the mysteries she left behind, thanks to the questions that she raised about what was stolen, what was hidden, and why it was done. The truth is that, much like Diana herself, it will not let itself rest in peace. According to an insider source, King Charles and Prince Harry met in private at Buckingham Palace last week. This meeting took place during Prince William's visit for the anniversary of Queen Elizabeth's passing away, and it was held to discuss the titles of King Charles's children. According to the source, Buckingham Palace is now experiencing a constitutional crisis that has been triggered by the never-ending flow of unconfirmed rumors that allege that a secret DNA test has revealed that the children of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are not related to their parents. These assertions have put the line of succession and the fundamental integrity of the crown under unprecedented scrutiny. Thank you for watching the video. Please let us know your thoughts, and goodbye for now.